The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Lynn Rosner-Ankney earned her BA from Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, and her MA in Literature from DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. While teaching at Columbia College and Harold Washington College, both in Chicago, she became interested in the connection between learning outside the classroom and student success, using ethnographic studies encouraging students to explore the city. Rosner-Ankney currently teaches English at Montgomery College with a special focus on developmental English. She enjoys using non-traditional texts to encourage her students to explore beyond the classroom walls.
So during our fellowship this year, we had the theme of immigration based on I Too Am American, Understanding the American Immigrant Experience. We went through several different sessions in the spring before going to museums, really to begin unpacking how museums are set up. Once we started getting into all of the museums, we were presented with a lot of information, good perspectives, amazing eye objects, lots of great stuff. But one thing kept coming up time and time again. At the end of a presentation, we'd ask, well, that's really great, but is there an exhibit we can send our students to help them begin to understand the immigrant experience? And time again, it was, well, we have this piece over here, or we have this item over here, or they can go online. And so as we started to go through this, I realized that there was a gap. And I wrestled with it for a little bit, but I realized that our students could fill that gap. Our students have this knowledge and have all of these great perspectives to begin to do something similar, and they could create their own immigration exhibit. That idea of having an immigration exhibit quickly morphed into something much bigger. And eventually I had my students work in 3 different English classes to collaborate on what I called the Museum of Immigration and American Identity. I had 3 classes this past fall. I had English 190, which is an Introduction to Lit class. And I imagined them, before I even met them, that they would work with the origin stories of the Americas to begin to set the stage. That would move over into my immigration or everything else class, the English 101. And then rounding that off would be a developmental English class, 001, taking on the task of a specific American identity. So starting off with the Intro to Lit class, this is a class where students are really first-year writing students. They don't necessarily need to be in those classes, but they're assessed at that same level. The class is capped at 25. I had about 17 students actively pursuing the class. This was an introduction to the study of literary forms as a way of helping students develop their intellectual growth. We looked at 4 key units of literature: short fiction, poetry, drama, and then I added a 4th one in here, folk tales, so we could specifically key on the idea of stories from the Americas. We read 2 folk tales from our textbook, The Graphic Canon, Coyote and the Pebbles, which tells of how we got stars, and a selection from the Popol Vuh, which is a South American creation tale. To round that off, I had students go to the National Museum of the American Indian and look for objects and items that resonated with them. Once they found an object they really liked, we worked backwards to find a creation tale or origin story that correlated with that item. And then students were able to use those 3 texts to develop out their component of our museum. So students got to choose one of 3 different themes or exhibit types. They could work with Coyote and the Pebbles, they could work with the Popol Vuh, or they could choose to work with their other tale. And together, depending on which segment they chose, they created group exhibits. So here's an example of the exhibits they created. Up at the top, we have a mask created to represent the physical and spiritual elements in the Popol Vuh. And over there, we also have a diorama showing the begetter forming the people out of masa. Down below, I have one of my students, Hend, who's showcasing her diorama about Coyote and the Pebbles, and you can see the stars hanging down, kind of twinkling. And then off to the corner is a close-up of a felt storyboard that a student created to show why Big Rock was located where it was and why bats have snub noses. So a lot of different origin stories, but all things that were really important to the idea of the American people. Coming up next is my English 101 class. This is an introduction to college writing class. It's the first of 2 freshman composition classes. Students in this class were very similar to my literature students. It's a class capped at 25. They have the same basic assessment and skill levels. Right? Students came to this class to learn how to write for a variety of audiences and to use a variety of rhetorical strategies. Ultimately, we wanted to guide students to writing essays of about 1,000 words. And we also wanted to move students from personal writing, self-reflective writing, to something more academic. And so I used the theme, just like we had in our cohort, of immigration, and use that as kind of a channeling force throughout the course, creating 4 units to correlate with 4 essays. What is American? Exploring or understanding the immigrant experience. What is Thanksgiving? And finally, do words matter? Right? We use these 4 themes or units throughout to gradually push writers into looking at something very analytical. The middle 2 units, exploring and understanding the immigrant experience and what is Thanksgiving, correlated most specifically with the museum projects. Okay? Once we got into those middle units, students were invited to go to the National Museum of American History. They had to do this on their own time because this was a night class. They were guided to look specifically at the food exhibit as well as the entire innovation wing, all located on the 1st floor of the American History Museum. And from there, begin to form ideas of what an immigrant's experience might be within this concept of food and innovation. We also had the added benefit of 2 really great resources. One was the Learning Lab, an online searchable collection of Smithsonian holdings. It was really great in having students be able to target and find items that they maybe couldn't find in the museum. And also, we benefited greatly from a presentation from Cedric Ye, head of the Armed Forces Division at the American History Museum, when he came to present on the Tacoma Park campus on the history of Chinese food. Now, all of these things kind of culminated into this idea of creating a project where students individually gave us something similar with an immigrant's lens. Each student would be responsible for their own unique exhibit, and they could take this wherever they wanted. But they needed to aim to tell the story of America through that theme of immigration. And here are some of the examples that they came up with. One common theme that I see through this is that idea of a collage exhibit. We have many pieces coming together to form one. Lots of different pictures, lots of different standards. Down at the bottom on that top screen, we have a collage of different standards of beauty as dictated through time and different waves of immigration. But we also have great representations of maps and flags, and my personal favorite is the soccer pitch down below, that really come to represent all of, not just the different countries that immigrants are coming from, but also faiths and cultures as well. Rounding things out was my English 001 class. This is a basic English class, so it's a developmental writing class. It's the first in the series of 2. Students are working at writing on everything from the sentence going to the paragraph into the essay level. And so we're working on writing all the way through, ultimately coming up with essays of about 500 words apiece. Ultimately, students in this class are trying to create a portfolio that will help them place into their next level. That's comprised of 3 essays, 2 that they've revised through the course of the semester, and 1 that's an in-class essay. To give them some sort of context for those essays, that's where I fed in the museum component. To set the stage, we spent most of the semester reading Jean Luen Yang's graphic novel, American Born Chinese, looking at the concepts of what it actually means to be American, even if you are from another country. Okay? As we finished up that novel, students were given a private tour from the National Museum of American History by Cedric Ye, and this was an incredibly meaningful moment. We got to ride the freight elevator, which was really, really cool, and we got to go back into storage and see some artifacts that weren't on exhibit, and that really was awesome for students to not just think about the theme of immigration, but also think about why museums were set up the way they were. And then they use that to help create their own exhibits. Students also were asked to focus after the tour with Cedric on the food and innovation exhibits. This time, though, instead of looking at it and imagining an immigrant perspective, to think about it through an American lens. And that brought us a few new exhibits. Students in this class were responsible for the American perspective of our museum. And I gave them the option to work in one of three groups. They self-selected. The options were to work with food, innovation, or the main character from our graphic novel. His name is Jin. Students didn't want to work with him, so they self-selected in between food and innovation, which made perfect sense. And here are some of those exhibits. The top two were taken in our classroom because we had a mini exhibition in our class. We set up the museum, we thought about why things would go where they would go, much like Cedric led us to understand. The top one, we have 3 different ways to make a hamburger with photographs and directions all the way through. We have a play on the Greensboro lunch counter, where the students in the top picture set up a lunch counter with an American flag tablecloth and invited the classmates to come over and eat pizza and drink Coke. The only requirement was that they had to say one thing that made somebody an American. And then we tried to recreate this in our own museum later by hanging these pieces up on the wall. Down below, you can see my cute little assistant, Robin. He's showing an interactive backyard barbecue setup that we had in our museum. It might be a little hard to see, but there's a mini grill, there's some kitchen utensils, and it was meant to replicate the fun and excitement of a backyard barbecue, which is crucial to American cooking. And then finally, we have an innovation section. The guys in my class all came together and brought different car parts. Again, it might be hard to see, but we have a car's axle in there. It's incredibly heavy and not at all fun to move, but they muscled it up there somehow. They also have a Bluetooth speaker in the steering wheel, and they were playing classic hip hop while people were in the museum. So this is a really fun moment for this class, especially after they had been working so hard on their portfolio. Okay. So we had the amazing benefit of having an actual place to house our museum. The last 2 weeks of the fall semester, the last week of classes and finals, we were able to display our museum in the Mays Gallery in the K-Fritz building of the Tacoma Park campus. So this is an open gallery space, really close to art studios and classrooms. So student and teacher and staff and faculty and administration foot traffic through there is really high, especially during this time of year. Students go to their final classes and go to their final exams. So there's a lot of foot traffic through there, and it was a lot of fun. We got to use some wall spaces. It's right over there off the side picture there. You can see how we hung the items up on the walls, and students could walk through literally a maze running into the different components. But we collected all of the origin stories in one wall, all of the immigrant experience on the side wall, and then the food and innovation took up the other side from the American perspective. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to go back one more. Let's see if I can pull up that last takeaway. I'm sorry. Okay. So this project was physically very overwhelming. Just physically moving all of the museum pieces. I had some great help from my family and some wonderful support from my colleagues. As I've been processing all of this, I've realized that there are several takeaways that I really see following me through, not just this semester, but future semesters as well. First of all, students were incredibly energized anytime they got to go to the museum. It was a great field trip, but getting out of the classroom, getting to walk around outside, getting to ride the metro, these were exciting moments, and that's something I want to continue using. More academically, though, the quality of their work peaked during the assignments that they had to do in correlation with their museum visits. This was especially obvious in my 190 class, where we did the museum project very early on. Okay? Their second essay was very strong. You could tell they spent a lot of time in thinking about how to craft their essay and where their thesis would go and all that great stuff. Maybe it was because their follow-up essay was about King Lear. I'm not really sure. But I like to think it has to do with being so ingrained with the material and feeling a sense of personal connection with what they were writing about. All right. Student engagement continued after the museum component as well, almost as if students were trusting me to give them something else exciting. They kept coming back kept waiting, and they were really pleasant about that all. The personal pride that we all got from the actual museum was really great as well. Just to see a student who had struggled all semester long hang up her piece or come by and see her piece hung up and see how excited I was for her that she could have that to share with everybody really meant a lot. And then finally, something that was totally unintended was this conversation that I could start to have with students about the correlation between crafting a physical object, like a museum exhibit, and crafting the thought-provoking essay. That both of those required the same skills. What's my topic? What's my point? How does my audience need that presented? And so these are definitely the things that need to come with me as I move forward. Thank you.